So, this is a verse which talks about how knowledge or perception can also be in the mode of ignorance. Is this visible to everyone there? There also? Can you see? No. Okay.
But they can bring it on their phone, like 1822, chapter 18, verse 22 from the Vedas.
They should also be used. You can see now?
Yeah.
Okay. So the topic broadly we'll discuss is when knowledge increases conflicts and when knowledge decreases conflicts. That's a broad topic we'll discuss. We live in Kali Yuga, which is the time of great conflicts. So I tell the meaning of the verse, each line, and then recite each line, and then we'll recite the verse. And especially we would like if some of the kids could recite the verse. So this Krishna is speaking in 18th chapter, 22nd verse. He says, Yattu Kritsnavat ekasmin. Yattu, that which certainly, Kritsnavat. Krishna is everything with. One who thinks ekasmin. Ek is one. One who thinks, or someone who thinks that one thing is everything. Who equates one thing with everything. Yattu Kritsnavat ekasmin. So let's recite this line. Yattu Kritsnavat ekasmin. So Kritsnavat ekasmin is a slight tongue twister. But then Karye is action. Saktam is attached. Ahaitukam. And in this way, the person becomes attached to one kind of action without considering properly cause and effect. Ahaitukam, hetu means cause. Ahaitukam here doesn't mean unmotivated. It means without properly understanding what is the cause and what will be the effect. So like you have one-sided view of things, narrow-minded view of things. So, Karye Saktam Ahaitukam. And then he says, Atattvarthavad. Tattva is truth. Artha is the meaning. That means without understanding the true meaning of things. Atattvarthavad. Alpamcha. Does this mean the person is ignorant? No, the person has knowledge, but alpa, meager knowledge. They have little knowledge, and they don't have a proper understanding of the meaning of things. Atattvarthavad alpamcha. Tad tamasam uttaharutam. So that tamasa. Tamasa is the mode of ignorance. Udaharutam. Udaharutam means thus it is illustrated. So Krishna is giving the characteristics of knowledge in the mode of ignorance. Three things. The first line thing he says is, they equate one thing with everything. So for example, there was racism in America, where a person's character was equated simply with the color of their skin. Or there's a caste system in India, where a person's entire life's capabilities were reduced to their birth. Yattu Kritsnavat ekasmin. One thing is made into everything. And then Karye Saktam Ahaitukam. One becomes attached. This is the right thing to do without considering cause and effect. That's the second part. So one is in terms of how we perceive, then what kind of action do we do? And the overall is atattvarthadalpamcha. It's a meager knowledge. It is knowledge, but it's meager knowledge. So let's try to recite this verse. It's a little difficult, but it's a very meaningful verse. Yattu Kritsnavat ekasmin. Yattu Kritsnavat ekasmin. Is it visible behind or should I increase the font? Is it better now? Karye Saktam Ahaitukam. Karye Saktam Ahaitukam. Karye Saktam Ahaitukam. Karye Saktam Ahaitukam. Atattvarthavad-alpamcha. 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 Tat tamasam udaharutam. Tat tamasam udaharutam. Tattamasam udaharutam Yattu Krishnavadekasmin Karye saktam ahaitukam Atatvarthavad alpam cha Tattamasam udaharutam. Yes. Any of the younger participants like to recite? You can try. It's a difficult verse, but there's no harm in trying.
Yattu Krishnam vat akashmin
Yattu Krishnavadekasmin
Karyasaktam ahaitukam Atatvartha vat alpam cha Tattamasam udartam.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please.
Yattu Krishnavadekasmin
Yattu Krishnavadekasmin
Karye saktamahaitukam
Karyasaktamahaitukam
Atatvartavadalpam cha
Atatvartavadalpancha
Tattamasamudahritam
Tattamasamudaratam.
Thank you. Anyone else? So, let's begin with some prayers. Om Jnanatimidandhasya Jnananjalishalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I'm grateful to be here with all of you today, and I'll discuss this verse from three broad perspectives. First, I'll talk about what it means in terms of.
Recording in progress.
So, I'll talk about the verse from three broad perspectives. One is what it means to Arjuna in the Bhagavad-Gita, then what it means universally speaking, and then we'll talk about what it means to us as devotees practicing bhakti in today's world. Now, where is the Bhagavad-Gita spoken? Kurukshetra. So, what is happening over there? A battle is happening, yes. So now, if we see, why was the Bhagavad Gita spoken? What had happened? Why did Krishna need to speak the Bhagavad Gita on the battlefield?
Because Arjuna was bewildered.
Yes, because Arjuna was bewildered. And why was Arjuna bewildered?
Because he don't want to kill his family members, his guru, his grandfather, his cousin.
Yes, excellent. He didn't want
Because he
to.
don't want to kill anybody.
Okay, let's take both answers one by one. He didn't want to kill his relatives, especially his venerable elders like Bhishma Drona Pramukta Sarvesham Cha Mahikshitam. So he was thinking that what is the use of fighting a war in which my entire family, my dynasty will die, and I will have to kill many of them, including my elders. Now that was true at one level. However, Krishna is telling him that that is only one part of the truth. Krishna is indicating to Arjuna that what you are seeing is knowledge in the mode of ignorance. This idea of knowledge in the mode of ignorance itself is paradoxical. Because normally we think knowledge and ignorance are opposites. The more knowledge we have, the more our ignorance decreases. Then how can there be knowledge in the mode of ignorance? What it means is that we have knowledge, but we have knowledge of only a small portion of reality. And therefore, what happens is that the more knowledge we get, the more it reinforces our ignorance. We interpret all of reality in such a way that we reinforce our preconceptions. So if we have a conception that a particular community is very miserly, then every time we hear that somebody from that community refused to do some charitable work or didn't refuse to help anyone, just see how miserly they are. And then if we hear that somebody from that community is very charitable, who is just putting on a show, So what happens is we overemphasize the evidence that supports our idea, and we de-emphasize, downplay, even deny any evidence that falsifies our ideas. And this is actually true universally. There was an American comedian who said that I have already made up my mind. Now don't confuse me with the facts. Well, how did you make up your mind if you didn't know the facts? No, I have already made up. There's a philosopher of science who said this kind of bias actually goes in science also. He said the theories that we like, he's also a scientist, but he's also a philosopher of science. So he says the theories we like, we call them facts. The facts we don't like, we call them theories. So this bias is almost everywhere. And it is a human fallibility which we can overcome. But in the case of Arjuna, coming back to our context, Arjuna was not seeing, okay, yes, they are my relatives and they are on the opposite, and there are my elders among them. But is he fighting against them because he hates them? No. He's fighting against them because they are supporting the side of vice. And those people, if they are allowed to live unchallenged, to have unchallenged power, they will break havoc in society. Duryodhana, who was the leader on the opposite side, was such a terrible person that even as a teenager, he had made a whole elaborate conspiracy to try to poison Bhima, who could be considered to be his rival. And then afterward, he made another conspiracy to burn the Pandavas alive. But not just the Pandavas, even their mother. He tried to burn them up. Then he tried to dishonor and disrobe Draupadi in public. Generally, if a person wants to harm someone, dishonor a woman, violate a woman, they'll do it privately somewhere. But if somebody does it publicly, that means they have no fear of the public. They have no fear of anyone. Imagine if somebody does this in a police station. That means they have no fear even of the law. So Duryodhana was a person like that. And if such a person became the law, imagine what havoc he would do in society. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, all that you are seeing is, there are only Bhishma, there are Bhishma and Drona over there. They are my relatives. How can I fight against them? It's true, but that's only a small portion of the reality. The reality is much bigger. Although they are relatives, they have chosen the side of evil. And you, Arjuna, are meant to fight, to establish, to protect society from aggressors. Arjuna was a martial guardian of society. He's what? He's a Kshatriya. Now we may feel that violence should be avoided. And yes, violence should be avoided as much as possible. However, sometimes violence is what is necessary to prevent violence. There is that Hindi saying, "Lato ke bhoot, baaton se nahi mante." Now there are many sayings in one language which can't be translated to another language. You try to translate this into English, what happens is, the ghosts of kicks don't learn by words. It makes no sense. But what it means essentially is that that some people just don't learn by appealing to their intelligence. They have to be taught the hard way. Say for example, if somewhere there is a genocide going on and the United Nations decides that we want to bring about peace over here. So they have to send a peacekeeping force. You want peace, they have to have force to maintain peace. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, you are not seeing that the whole picture is that these people, if they gain power, especially if they gain unchallenged power, they will destroy society. They'll exploit everything for their own ulterior purposes and they will bring untold suffering on the citizens whom you are duty bound to protect. Therefore, you have to fight. So, yattu kuchnavade kasmin. You see one thing and make it into everything. You see, oh, there are Bhishma and Drona over there, they're my relatives. How can I fight against them? Karye saktamahetukam. Therefore, without seeing the whole picture, you're thinking, I cannot fight. How can I fight against my relatives? Well, sometimes some questions are phrased in such a way that the questions are not seeking an answer. The questions are seeking an agreement. Sometimes some people phrase a question in such a way that no decent person can say no to that question. Just have to agree with it. But that is manipulation of information. That is manipulation. So how can you kill your own grandfather? How can you kill your own teacher? Yeah, nobody can do that. But is that what is happening over here? Is Arjuna in cold blood going about killing his singling out his grandfather and his teacher and is killing them? No. He's fighting a bigger war for a bigger cause. And within that, they happen to be on the wrong side. So, karye saktam ahetukam. You are getting to attach to one action, that is non-violence. And non-violence is good. I was recently speaking at Stanford, and there one speaking on the Bhagavad-Gita, one person asked, if Krishna is God, why does Krishna not tell Arjuna to forgive everyone? Just have peace. He was explaining that forgiveness is good, even for essential as an individual virtue. But forgiveness cannot be the default state policy. If somebody comes to our house as a guest and they steal something from our house, we feel angry. I invited you as a guest. Why did you do something like that? But if they say, no, okay, it was a moment of weakness, I needed this, and I thought this was an easy way to get it. They give some explanation. Whether they're genuine or not, but at least they give some explanation. Then we say, okay, we may forgive them. You've never done this in the past, don't do it again. So as an individual virtue, we all sometimes make mistakes. So as an individual virtue, it is good to forgive because we all make mistakes. But forgiveness cannot be the default state policy. Imagine the government announces from today onwards, anybody who steals anything from any shop or any home, they will be forgiven. Can you imagine what will happen in society? But you don't have to imagine. California has made a law like this. Apparently something like if you steal from a shopping mall anything below, I think $800, The police will, even if they arrest you, they will release you without bail. Their reasoning is that, oh, people, if they're stealing, they must be very poor and they need things, that's why they're stealing. But, these people, what do they steal? They see you steal expensive purses and expensive colognes and expensive devices, but all below $800. And then they resell it. So, forgiveness cannot be the default state policy. So, Krishna is telling Arjuna, here you are not simply acting as an individual. You are a guardian of society. And you have to represent the state. And therefore, you need to fight. And Arjuna is not fighting for revenge. He is fighting for justice. Can anyone say what is the difference between fighting for revenge and fighting for justice? Okay, how many of you think it is the same? Fighting for revenge and fighting for justice? Well, no one. Okay, they are two different things. So what do you think is the difference between the two?
Revenge is you fighting with anger. With,
That's anger.
yes, and it's
Okay.
not appropriate. But for justice, yeah.
Okay, anger, there's anger over there. That's one aspect to it.
Or
So,
ego.
but justice is
Without of
like
ego.
for your duty, something like
Justice
this.
is duty. Okay.
Justice is on the side of dharma or the side of morality, but
Sorry, earlier also there's an answer coming, but from it was like a disembodied voice for me. Who is speaking? Oh, okay. Yes, please. Yeah.
so justice will be on the path of dharma or law or or morality, but revenge can be anything. They can that will be totally without law, without dharma, and just ego satisfaction. That's it.
Okay. So it's for ego satisfaction. Well, justice is on the path of dharma. Yeah, good. Thank you. Yes, you want to add something?
Well, it's kind of what I was going to say, that revenge is a selfish motive. It's for your own pleasure, really. You're thinking that by doing that, you're going to feel better.
Yeah.
So it's motivated by your own personal desire, whereas justice is motivated by a greater cause, the cause of the community or whatever. So, yeah.
Yes, justice is motivated by a bigger cause. Yes. There are very different ways of phrasing it. Thank you. All of you made very important points. We could say two things. That justice is... Revenge is cold-blooded. Whereas justice is level-headed. What it means is that when somebody wants revenge, they just almost dehumanize the other person. You are such a terrible person and I want to make you suffer. As much as you made me suffer or more. Whereas justice is level-headed. Justice means that, okay, you did this punishment, you did this wrong, and therefore there are multiple purposes why justice may be established. It is to set an example so that others don't do the same thing. It is to give a person a deterrent that if you do this, this is going to happen. Therefore, don't do this again. And it is also to give some kind of recompensation or to some kind of balance for the person who has been victimized and suffered. It is not just to cause pain to the other person. Revenge is all about causing pain to the other person. Whereas justice is more about correcting the wrong that has been done. Correcting the wrong can be multiple aspects. One aspect is make sure that that person doesn't do the same thing again. Second is that make sure that others don't take that example and start doing a similar thing. And third is the person who has been hurt, to whatever extent possible, their hurt can be healed. Their damage can be compensated for. Some harms cannot be compensated for, but to whatever extent is possible. That's why justice is level-headed. And that's why justice cannot be done with anger. Now, a judge should not be angry while giving a judgment. The judge should be careful, level-headed. So that's why we will see in the Gita, time and time again, although Krishna tells Arjuna to fight, Krishna also tells Arjuna, give up anger. Give up anger. He says anger is a path to hell. Fight without having any animosity towards anyone. It says, Nirvairaha sarvabhuteshu. Nirvaira, have no animosity. So, Atattvarthavad alpamcha. You are not looking at the big picture of what caused the war. Alpamcha, oh, they are my relatives. That's a part of the reality, but it's a meager reality. So when we take some small thing and make that into a very big thing, that is where our knowledge of the small thing, all knowledge is valuable. But sometimes the knowledge of the small thing comes in the way of our understanding of the big thing. Then that's where the problem comes. Like I earlier gave the example of racism or casteism. Oh, this person is from this social group. How can this person be good? How can this person be intelligent? How can this person have any talent? So we take that one thing and then we don't look at anything else. That's the problem. That's knowledge in the mode of ignorance. So this was the first part. I said I'll talk about what this means for Arjuna. So before I go to the second part, at any point in this class, feel free to ask questions if you have any. Okay? And I will feel free to not answer them. What I mean is that if that question is going to be answered later in the class or it is not directly relevant, so I may choose not to answer it. So in that sense, I'll feel free. But any questions till this point about knowledge in the mode of ignorance? Yes, please.
What's your view on the death penalty? I know it's, of course, means of punishment in India, parts of the United States, not in Canada. What's your views on the death penalty for people that have committed wrong, murder?
What about the death penalty for people who have done wrong? It's a complex issue. And I'll talk a few points from both sides. See, traditionally, there was death penalty. In fact, the Bhagavad-Gita says that some people, the 6 kinds of aggressors, who should be punished, and punishment is with death. So if somebody sets fire to somebody's house, somebody abducts a woman, somebody tries to kill, tries to poison, tries to steal all of one's property. So there are 6 kinds of aggressors who should be punished with death. That's the traditional understanding. Now, across most traditions, death punishment was common. Now, in today's world, what has happened is that justice has become very complicated, very bureaucratic. And because of that, there are often mistakes in administering justice. That is what is called a miscarriage of justice. So, people who have very good lawyers, they can get away with daylight crime. And people, I have nothing against lawyers. I have many friends who are lawyers, but in that the way the profession is structured, and sometimes people who do not get a good lawyer, they may do a small crime and they may get a big punishment. And sometimes years afterward, they realize, okay, we wrongly persecuted this person, and sometimes the person will be released. Sometimes. So there is that fear of miscarriage of justice. And death penalty is irreversible. If you wrongfully kill a person, sentence a person to death, then we can't undo it. At least if a person is wrongfully put in jail, maybe later on some evidence comes up, some better legal representation comes up for that person, they will be released. So it has been found that people who are from, say, less economically privileged backgrounds, or from those social groups which are against which sometimes society is biased, then often those people for a similar crime get a far severe punishment than other people. And even they may get death punishment also, more than other people. So because of that, there is a reasonable hesitation for implementing the death punishment. Now, having said this, that there is the principle and there is the practice. So in practice, yes, the death punishment, there are problems in implementing it. And that has to be acknowledged. At the same time, while acknowledging the problems with the practice of a particular principle, we cannot reject the principles. Some crimes are so heinous that death is the best deterrent for people to not do that crime. Because what happens in society is that most people, not most, yeah, many, all of us actually have a lower side. And some of us have a conscience which stops us from indulging in the lower side. But we all can succumb to the lower side. And one of the things that stops us from succumbing to the lower side is the fear of consequence. The fear of consequence. And that's why in justice, the saying is that justice should not only be done, justice should be seen to be done. So when somebody commits some very heinous crimes, at that time, society or those who are the administrators of society have to send a forceful message that this kind of thing will not be tolerated. And there are cases where it's black and white. Sometimes the person is actually caught in that. The person, sometimes some people are so brazen that they admit doing the crime. They admit, I did this, I killed this person in cold blood. I committed this rape, I did this child abuse. Sometimes some people are what you can say psychopaths or sociopaths. They seem to have no conscience. They get a perverse delight in hurting others. So such kind of crimes need to be punished. So I would say that rejecting the principle itself is removing a valuable, even vital deterrence from society. Now, there has to be a lot of caution in how the principle is applied in practice. But the principle is valuable. Deterrence does work. If you consider, most of us are from India and Pakistan, or India and China for that matter, we had multiple wars in the 1970s. But in the 1980s, 1990s, all the three countries got nuclear weapons. And now there has been no overt war. There have been, of course, covert aggressions. And I don't want to go into geopolitics of everything. But the point is, each side knows if we attack the other person, there will be consequences. And nuclear war means there will be devastating consequences. So that has kept the war below a particular threshold. So deterrence does work. And fear of death punishment is a strong deterrent. So that would be my broad answer to the question. Okay? Okay. You want to add something? Thank you. So this is, we talk about knowledge in the mode of ignorance in the specific sense of Arjuna. That actually brought us to the broad sense of the example that you gave us. The question that you brought is very good. So we could say knowledge in the mode of ignorance, applying this to will be that because that punishment has been talked about in the tradition, therefore it has to be implemented. How can you question it? Well, yeah, there can be a valid question about it. Or the other extreme could be that there can be miscarriage of justice and you cannot reverse this. How can you even consider having the death punishment? Well, no, there are some cases where things are black and white. Just because there are shades of grey does not mean that black and white cease to exist. Black and white also exist and shades of grey also exist. So there are times when there's black and white. Things have to be done accordingly. So at a broad level, we humans, we live in a complicated world. And one of the ways we try to deal with the complexity of the world around us is by simplifying the complexity into categories. Into categories means what? Say, if I see someone, if I'm in India, I see someone, okay, this person, the way they are dressed, the way they are looking, probably this person doesn't know English. So I may speak with them in a vernacular language. Or if somebody, I see that, okay, if I see this person is a child, then I won't speak with the child the way I would speak with somebody who is adult, who's the PhD. I will speak the same subject but differently. So for functioning in the world, we need to place things in categories. Okay, this is an Indian, this is non-Indian, this is an adult, this is a child, this is a male, this is female. We will deal with different people in like somewhat different, appropriate ways. So we need to categorize the world. Now the categorization in one sense is essential for functioning, because the complexity of the world can otherwise overwhelm us. Every time we meet someone, we think, okay, which language should I speak? What level of vocabulary should I speak? What topic should I speak? How should I begin this discussion? We may have to think a little bit about this. We have to start everything from scratch. We will not be able to speak at all. We have to have some basic sense of, okay, where does this person fall? Where does the discussion fall? And then we start a discussion. So we need categorization. But the problem is that sometimes this categorization, which can be useful, can also become harmful. When we try to reduce reality into simple categories. So there are functional categories and there are moral categories. Functional categories, okay, this person is adult, this person is a small child, so I'll speak differently with different people. But moral categories is, this person is, this kind of people are good, this kind of people are bad. And we all have this kind of what can be called as biases or prejudices. Now the problem with biases and prejudices is that those who are biased don't think they're biased. Because often their biases are based on experience. Their biases are based on experience. What do I mean by that? That if somebody thinks, oh, a member of this particular community is miserly, they probably had interaction with somebody from that community who was miserly. And maybe not just one experience, maybe many experiences. But the problem is, we take our experiences, which are often small, and we make vast generalizations from those experiences. And that is where the biases arise. So biases are not because that person having a bias is a bad person. It is because they have had bad experiences, and then two things. They have had bad experiences, and then they have made bad inferences from those bad experiences. The bad inferences that, okay, all people from this category are like this. And that is where biases come up. And these can be hugely problematic, especially in today's world where we live in a multicultural society, multicultural world. We encounter with people of very different categories. So what happens is that our biases, so we may grow up with certain biases and we encounter people. And then we find the person is quite different from what I thought it would be. And then how do we understand this? So if we consider, in India, quite often the West is considered to be a source of moral degradation. In the West there is so much sensuality, there is so much explicit movies and stuff like that. Well, there's truth to that. But when the British came to India, especially the British were ruling India in the 18th century, especially in the 19th century, was a part of the 19th century. At that time, there was what was called the age of Victorian morality, where it was very puritanical. And there are accounts of how the British viewed the Indians. And they said, these Indian women, they have absolutely no sense of decency. Now, they shamelessly appear in public without wearing any socks. They expose their feet and ankles to everyone. Now, in Britain is a cold country. So naturally cover your legs. India is a hot country. If you start wearing socks all the time, you wear socks in a sweaty country for one day, you cannot tolerate the smell after one day. So what has happened is, okay, there is a particular vision of what is decency in one part of the world. And when somebody imposes that on somebody else, he says, you have no sense of decency. Well, maybe not. Don't be so harsh in judgment. So what happens here is that we take our experience, we take our standards and impose them on others. And that is where problems start coming. So historically, biases have been a big problem. As we are living in more and more multicultural society, we have two options. Either when we encounter people, we repeatedly fit them into the prefabricated categories. And anything that contradicts us, bad data. This person is just putting up a show. nothing else. Or we let our experiences revise our preconceptions. We let our experiences cause us to re-examine our preconceptions. And to the extent we can do that, to that extent we can function in a cooperative way, function in a less disharmonious way. So it is, even from a social perspective, this knowledge in the mode of ignorance is very important to understand. And politics is also becoming very polarizing. I don't know about Canada, but America, it's like there are cases where in the same family there is one person supports a Republican, another person supports the Democrat, and then the two family members can't talk with each other. They start demonizing the other person because of their political choices. And 10, 15, 20, even 20 years ago, people wouldn't even bother. Whom did you vote for? That's not important for us. But now, it becomes such an important thing. And is a person determined only by whom they vote for? That's one part of who they are. But again, knowledge in the mode of ignorance, I don't see this person my relative or my friend. We have had such a long history together. You voted for this person? What kind of human being are you? You know, I detest you, I reject you, I condemn you, I demonize you. Since this knowledge in the mode of ignorance is very much prevalent in today's world. And now with social media being available more and more, we have Facebook. Facebook is the shelter of people who cannot face books. What I mean that is, if you want to seriously understand subject, we need to read books. Books involve a serious analysis of the subject. But what happens is, you don't want to read books, you want to read short articles, and you read a lot of short articles, you think, I know about the subject. But what happens is, especially if you are in social media, in one sense, they have algorithms which curate content. And when we read a particular kind of content, we choose a particular kind of content, they will give us more and more that kind of content. So if somebody reads something which is from a particular political perspective, then they read one article, then they will, after that in their feed, they will say 10 other similar articles, reinforcing the same perspective. And then what happens is, they think this is the only right thing, and anybody who disagrees with it, how could a person be so ignorant, so stupid, or so evil? Those are the only three options left for them. Ignorant, or stupid, or evil. So disagreement is, ignorant means they have no information. Stupid means they have no judgment. And evil means they have no conscience. So in this way, we demonize others. So we live in an echo chamber. And that's why, in one sense, the internet has given us access to a lot of information. But simultaneously, we are more and more vulnerable to falling into this trap of gaining knowledge that only reinforces our ignorance. That knowledge doesn't remove our ignorance. It just increases our conviction about the correctness of our preconceptions. It doesn't cause us to re-examine our preconceptions. So that's how this is broadly relevant for us. Any questions or comments at this point? Okay. So, yes, please.
So how do we tell which knowledge is reinforcing our ignorance and which knowledge is not? I guess is probably the difference between which knowledge to take.
Yeah. So how do we know which knowledge is reinforcing our ignorance and which is countering our ignorance? Well, two things broadly. First is that we could say at one level, we don't have the time or the resources to do a thorough study about every subject that we come across. There are so many issues in the world. Now you see, in today's world there are so many problems about which, if you ask people, what exactly is the problem? They don't have very clear understanding. But who is the cause of the problem? They have great certainty. What caused the Ukraine-Russia war? What exactly is the history? Very few people know. But who is evil? Oh, this person is evil, this person is evil. Or what caused the inflation in today's world? What exactly is the inflation and how did it go about? How did it happen? No. Who caused it? Oh, this politician caused it. This politician is responsible. So it's remarkable, we have very little clarity about the issue, but very great certainty about the cause of the issue. So we just don't have the capacity to actually analyze every single issue that comes across us. So I would say that first thing is issues that are of importance for us. Issues that are of importance for us, we need to spend time in trying to examine alternative perspectives. Okay, this is what my understanding is. We need to understand our understanding, re-examine our understanding. Okay, why do some people have different opinions? There's some issues important for us, then we need to examine from multiple perspectives. Srila Prabhupada also said when we study scripture, we study it from different perspectives. So if something is very important for us. And especially if people whom we respect have a different opinion, then we need to think, maybe the kind of certainty I have about this issue, rather than decreasing my respect for that person because they have a different opinion, maybe I need to decrease my certainty about that opinion. And this is where humility is a very important virtue. So humility can be defined in many different ways. But as physical humility is when we come in front of the Lord, we offer our respects, we bow down. But intellectual humility means at least being open to the possibility that what I don't know may be more important than what I know. That what I don't know may be more important than what I know. Actually, this principle can help us in so many of our relationships also. We often enter into a particular interaction, convinced that this person is wrong, irresponsible, moron. And then we go on a tirade against that person. And then afterward we understand, the reality was very different. So just reality, okay, what I don't know may be more important than what I know. So issues that are important for us and issues where people whom we respect have an opinion different from us. Those are the issues where we need to examine. And then we can broaden our understanding. It's not that we abandon our previous understanding. Sometimes we may. But many times at least we nuance our understanding. Okay, this issue I thought was black and white. But there are a few shades of grey in this issue also. Does that answer your question?
So essentially, following in the footsteps of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So those that you respect, right, such as mentors or so, and examining the Shastras, right, from different angles of view. And, can we make a connection like that with that?
Okay, it's a good question. So, can we make a connection with those whom we respect? Yes, I would say that. Actually, that's a very good segue for the third part of what I was going to speak today. That sometimes, even among devotees, there may be different opinions about issues. Among devotees, there may be different opinions about some issues. And it is very easy for one devotee to demonize another devotee because they have a different opinion about it. So if we say, okay, what do Guru Sadhu Shastra say? We say we should respect devotees. But a damn devotee may have an opinion that we just can't respect. Okay, I can't respect this opinion. But that doesn't mean I have to disrespect this devotee. The opinion belongs to the person, but the opinion is not the person. So I can disagree with the opinion, I can even disrespect the opinion, but I don't have to disrespect that person. I was once doing some conflict resolution. There were two people, two devotees. So the first devotee said to the second, now I know you are angry with me. Second devotee said, I'm not angry with you. Anger is an expensive emotion and you are not worthy. If somebody comes with such an attitude, no kind of resolution is possible. Hmm. So sometimes we just so I would say humility is sometimes that humility is what enables us to be comfortable with uncertainty. Comfortable with uncertainty. That okay, maybe this issue is too complex. Yes, we can consult Guru Sadhu Shastra, but what happens is Guru Sadhu Shastra has given particular understandings, but how that understanding applies in today's world in particular context. For that, even different devotees may have different opinions. So at that time, what do we do? So if that issue is not where we are a major stakeholder, then better not make a very categorical judgment of the issue. So humility means I'm comfortable with uncertainty. Yes, I'm certain about the core principles of bhakti. That Krishna is God and I am meant to serve Him. Therein is the purpose and perfection of my life. But specifically, for this issue, okay, I'm open. I don't have to have a great level of certainty. I don't have to have a great level of morality about my certainty. I am right and I am virtuous for being right. Other person is wrong and that other person is terrible because they are wrong on that issue. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Yes, please.
I was just thinking how sometimes we pass on these problems not only between each other but also onto Krishna himself.
What do you mean? Pass on to Krishna?
So there's some people who have like a really big issue, for example, of Krishna when he has told to Bhima to hit Duryodhana below the waist. So it seems like a small piece of information that is blocking their bigger understanding. And I'm just wondering how would you answer that question?
Yes. Yeah. So sometimes some actions of Krishna may block people from appreciating Krishna entirely. Say for example, Krishna told Bhima to hit Duryodhana below the thigh. And you say, if Krishna can tell somebody to do like this, what kind of God is he? And how can I worship such a God? They will reject Krishna because of that. So yes, that's also a good example of we take one thing and we make it into everything. In fact, that was a topic I was thinking of speaking on today, because Lord Balram Jayanti is coming soon. Balram Jayanti. So in that particular incident, actually Balram takes the role of the skeptic. In the Mahabharata is described, Balram says that Bhima cheated and Krishna, you caused Bhima to cheat. And what does Krishna reply? Krishna replies that it was important that justice be established. And what kind of morality are you talking about? Krishna is respectful because Balaram is the older brother. So Krishna makes his point. He says, I'm talking from the Mahabharata, what he says, paraphrasing, he says that this was the Bhima who tried to kill Arjuna's, this was the Duryodhana who tried to kill Bhima's mother. This was Duryodhana who tried to dishonor Bhima's wife. This was Duryodhana who tried to poison Bhima. This was Duryodhana who delighted in causing pain to Bhima and everyone that Bhima loved. When he had done all those unfair things, Bhima had to bring him down. The means that he adopted don't matter. He had to bring him down. Now, Krishna Balram still plays the skeptic's role. He says, now Krishna, you can convince anyone about anything. And he just walks away from it. He doesn't accept it. But the point was that situations had made it into a rigged match. Rigged match means, how many of you, I don't want to insult your intelligence, but how many of you know about cricket? Cricket. No, most Indians know about cricket. But I was told whenever I give classes in America, if I mention cricket, most Americans think about the insect, not the game. So, suppose in cricket, there is a match and a bowler is supposed to bowl. And it's declared that the only way that the bowler bowls and clean bowls the batsman. But no matter how many times the bowler clean bowls the batsman is, that particular match is written in such a way that if the batsman is bowled, the batsman is not out. The batsman is caught, the batsman is not out. There are basically 3 ways or 4 ways in which a batsman can get out. You can bowl the batsman out, you can have a person caught, the person can be, 4 or 5 ways, I don't go into cricket all of it. Whatever ways are there. You can be stumped, you can be run out, you can be LBW, whatever. But all the ways the batsman can get out. If the rules of the game are changed in such a way that all the ways by which a batsman can get out is declared that the batsman will not be out by it. And the bowler is bowling and bowling and bowling. And it makes the batsman out, but the batsman is not out. And the batsman hits in between, keeps hitting in between. Now the game is rigged against the bowler. Then what is the bowler going to do? If you can't get the batsman out at all, no matter what you do, the bowler is, in one sense, the bowler has to do all the hard work, run for each ball. Comes running and bowls and there's nothing. The batsman just keeps hitting. And even the batsman gets out, the batsman is not out. So that was Bhima's predicament. By the blessing of Gandhari, what had happened was Duryodhana's body had become invulnerable. No matter how many times and how severely Bhima hit Duryodhana, nothing happened to him. Bhima on that day fought the best battle of his life, the best mace fight of his life. There were several occasions when Bhima dodged Duryodhana's charge and hit Duryodhana so hard that it would have cracked a mountain apart. And the force of the blow was such that Duryodhana was flown away. Duryodhana was also a powerful person. And to get a person like him to fly away is an achievement. But he would fly away and fall with a thud. But then he would get up. Nothing. Not a limb is broken. Not a rash on the skin. Not even a little scratch. Nothing. And all this time, what was happening was Duryodhana was also hitting Bhima. Duryodhana was not no mediocre fighter. There are several times Duryodhana hit Bhima severely. At one particular point, Duryodhana got a particularly painful blow on Bhima. And at that time, just like Duryodhana, he was actually completely unhurt, although Bhima was hitting him very severely. So at this point, although Bhima was severely hurt, Bhima acted as if he was completely unhurt. He remained very stoic. And that caused Duryodhana to hesitate. You hit one blow and you expect the opponent to wince, to get wounded, to fall. And if at that moment, if Bhima had not remained stoic, Duryodhana would have followed that up with another blow, and he could have killed Bhima at that time. So Bhima withstood it all. But at that time, Krishna was repeatedly telling Bhima, hit him below the waist, below the belt. Normal thing is below the belt. There it was below the waist. But Bhima was not ready to do that. But at this point, Bhima realized, I will not be able to withstand another blow like this. That if this goes on, Bhima will kill me. Bhima and Duryodhana will kill me. And therefore, Bhima had to make a decision. So, if you know in cricket, there was one infamous series where I think it was England versus Australia, and it's called Bodyline. This injured all the Australian batsmen. And that's how they tried to win the match. So if a bowler cannot get the batsman out, at that time Don Bradman was there and they just couldn't get him out. So they just bowled on the body and tried to injure everyone. So the bowler, if there's no way they can get the batsman out, even if they get the batsman out, the batsman is not out. Then what can the bowler do? How is the bowler save the day? Just injure the opposite batsman. Get them out of the field. You cannot get them out by getting them out. Get them out by making them retired hurt. So that's what Bhima had to do. The match was rigged against him so that no matter how well he fought, there was just no way he could win. And that's why he finally agreed to Krishna's pointer and he hit Bhima below the waist. So it was not a cheap trick to win the match. It was the necessary thing to do for him to survive or to speak of to succeed. So if you look at the whole picture, if you look at only a fragment, yes, it does seem unfair. But that's again looking at only one part of the picture, not looking at the whole picture. So was Krishna unfair? Well, yeah, in terms of suggesting that particular action, it can seem unfair. But if you look at the whole picture, the match was unfair to Bhima, and the only way he could balance the unfairness against him was by doing something which would normally be unfair. Does that answer the question?
I heard also that if Duryodhana would have won, he would have then considered to have won the whole battle and taken the kingdom.
Yeah, of course, that was the condition of the match also. Yudhishthir had been, you could say, extraordinarily generous over there. That was, Krishna didn't approve of Yudhishthir's generosity over there. Yes, ma'am, you wanted something?
Bhima had also taken a vow that he would smash Duryodhana's thigh because of the way he treated Draupadi in public by asking her to come and sit on his
Yes.
thigh. So
That
it's
is true.
kind of also a pre-committed
Yes,
course of
that's true.
action.
That's also an important point. So there's also Bhima had taken a vow to break Duryodhana's thigh, because Duryodhana had, after they had won Draupadi the gambling match, he said, "Come, you sit on my thigh now," and he bared his thigh before her. So it's an obscene gesture in public. Now, yes, that Bhima had that vow, but Bhima's plan had been originally to defeat Duryodhana in a fair fight and then break his thigh. That had been his original intention. Of course, there was another point also, that there was a great sage Maitreya. Maitreya or Markandeya? I can't forget. I think it's Maitreya Rishi only. He had come to the assembly before the war, and he had requested Duryodhana, don't fight against the Pandavas. That will destroy you. So this sage, when he said this, Duryodhana was so insolent that he, instead of even responding verbally, clapped his thigh or slammed his thigh like this, to indicate how strong I am. And then that sage got furious. He says, "These are the thighs you are proud of. These thighs will be the cause of your death." So there's a curse there also. So it is not just Krishna acting unfairly. There are multiple factors involved. Thank you. Yeah, so if somebody has certain issues with Krishna, then it's issues with Krishna. Then we have to address those issues. Because how can you question Krishna? Krishna is God. If you question Krishna, you will go to hell. Well, that is not the way to increase or to help them resolve the issue. Now we have to try to help them get a broader understanding by which they can go beyond that issue, see beyond that particular issue. Thank you. Yes. So, I won't ask for any other questions. I want to complete this class, just a few more minutes. So I was talking about among devotees also sometimes there can be differences of opinion. And they can become escalated. They can become excessive. So why might this happen? Okay, let me show. I wanted to show 3-4 slides, but I'll just show one slide. This is actually not charging. So, now, is this visible? Yes. So what happens is, God as such is the big thing, the ultimate big thing. And God is, or Krishna is very difficult to access, very difficult to experience. So we all have small things that give us experience of the big thing. So what do I mean by small things? Not necessarily small things, but as compared to God, they are small things. So let's look at it from another perspective. So Krishna is at the center. And some people may experience Krishna through the social pathway. What do I mean social pathway? They come in the association of devotees and they find out devotees treat me so kindly, they're such nice people. I want to be a part of this community. If devotees are so nice, how nice Krishna must be. So they experience Krishna through social pathway. Many times people come to spirituality because they want a sense of belonging, they want a sense of community. And yes, Krishna can be experienced through this. But that is not the only way. I'll explain all the others, but let's go through this quickly. There's an intellectual pathway. There are some people who have existential questions. And then they hear classes, they hear philosophy. And then they understand, oh, wow, I got so many answers. This is what I want. For them, the intellectual nourishment, the philosophical clarity is what gives them an experience of Krishna. It's not just intellectual. Through them, they actually experience Krishna. Why? Because that's what giving them the clarity. It's giving them clarity, the conviction, the connection with Krishna. Some people may come to the psychological pathway. Psychological means they are very mentally disturbed, agitated. They come to a temple and they feel very peaceful. I don't know, even people, there have been surveys done that even atheists, when they come to a holy place, be it a temple or other places, they feel some kind of peace over there. They feel some vibes are different over here. They may not say that this is because of God, but they say the vibes are different, that's experienced. So some people may want peace, some people may want to relief from stress. And if they feel peaceful when they come to a spiritual path or they connect with Krishna, okay, that's what is their experience of Krishna. And for some people, it may be the cultural. By cultural, I mean, okay, this is the way we should dress. This is the way we should worship the deities. When you're doing the arati, to move this 4 times here, 3 times here, 2 times here, like that. The precision of the rituals. And then they do it very, very precisely. That's when they experience Krishna. If somebody fasts on Ekadashi without taking water or just taking water, very, very like a strict fasting, then they feel, yeah, I did something for Krishna. And I'm experiencing Krishna. So different people actually experience Krishna in different ways. And for now, the social, the intellectual, the psychological, the cultural, all these are important. As compared to Krishna, who is the ultimate big thing, they are small things. Now for us, through these small things, we experience the big thing that is Krishna. But what often happens is, because we experience the big thing through the small thing, we equate the small thing with the big thing. So if somebody thinks that, oh, it is in the association of devotees. Devotees are so kind and so sweet and so gentle. I experience Krishna's love. And then they are not treated well by devotees. Some devotee misbehaves with them. Some devotee neglects them, some devotee, basically they are mistreated by devotees. And then they start thinking, what am I doing even practicing bhakti? One of my devotee friends like to say that initially when people come new, we feed them fried pakoras. And after they become serious, we fry them like pakoras. Do this service. Why am I not doing this service? We are not serious about bhakti. We often guilt people into practicing bhakti. So what happens is, that same person, if that was the primary thing that brought us to bhakti, and then if that is not happening, if devotees are no longer kind and sweet, say, why should I practice bhakti? And somebody will say, somebody else will come from the intellectual side. You see, the philosophy is still there. You study the philosophy. Who is living the philosophy? Why should I practice it if people are not living the philosophy? So when whatever small thing we are practicing, through which we are experiencing the big thing, You can see one of these, there is a quake. You can see a quake over there. So when there is a quake, there are two choices. We actually go to the big thing, or we go out of even the small thing. So for all of us, there may be different things that give us experience of Krishna. And we have to take those very seriously. Because we are experiencing Krishna through those things. But that doesn't necessarily mean everybody else is experiencing Krishna through the same thing. Different devotees may experience Krishna through different things. So somebody may experience Krishna through the precision of the rituals. And if they're doing that, that's beautiful. They're actually experiencing Krishna. We can't just say that they're just doing the rituals. If somebody's fasting very seriously on Ekadashi, and they fast. Now, it could be just austerity, it could just be willpower, but it could be actually experiencing Krishna through that. Somebody very diligently, every day for 1 hour, I'll study Bhagavatam. And sometimes if you ask them questions about the Bhagavatam, you may think that they don't have much clarity. They're not really, we could say that they're not really very intellectually, carefully analyzing the Bhagavatam. If somebody wants to take I know many devotee friends of mine, they take about that, okay, in the Chaturmas, in these 4 months, I'll read the entire 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. It's a good vow to take. But you know, they are going at like a racehorse speed. They have to complete the whole Bhagavatam. And then I ask them, that, you know, okay, what do you remember? Or what do you think about this book? I read it, but I don't really remember. So that I start thinking, you know, what is the use of such a thing? But actually, for me, it is that I need to gain clarity about a particular point. Now, I may read one purport, I may read one purport 10 times, and then I may hear lectures on this and analyze it and meditate on it. And I don't need the satisfaction of having read the whole book. I need the satisfaction of having understood a concept. But not everybody is like that. They feel that they have served the Bhagavatam. They read the 10th canto, they served the Bhagavatam. So for them, even reading is more a cultural activity than intellectual activity. Now, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? Well, if they are actually trying to share Krishna Bhakti by speaking about it and they don't have clear understanding, that could be a problem. But if that is the way they are expressing their seriousness to Krishna by practicing Bhakti, then I have no right to trivialize them by saying, no, they're not even understanding anything. What is the use of this ritualistic reading? For them, it may not be ritual. For them, see, sometimes when we study scripture, it is not just intellectual comprehension that connects us with Krishna. It is simply the act of picking up a script, keeping a sacred book, reading the book, and exposing ourselves to some vibration connected with Krishna. That can uplift us, that can purify us. And that's how we experience, that's how that person may be experiencing Krishna. I may be experiencing Krishna in a different way. So many times when conflicts come among devotees, conflicts come because we experience Krishna through one way and we consider that to be extremely important. And if somebody else is not doing that, then we start thinking, in devotee circles, disagreement is immediately labeled as deviation. You are doing you're not just intellectually disagreeing with me, you are morally deviating from Krishna. Or you are morally deviating from our teachers, Krishna Prabhu. Now, of course, there are some times when people do deviate. But it is not necessary that just because somebody else is doing a bhakti in a slightly different way, that does not mean that that person is not serious about bhakti. Now, we need to see the substance of Krishna. How committed is this person to Krishna? How are they experiencing Krishna in their lives? And if we see that, we will actually start appreciating the multifacetedness of Krishna. How Krishna can attract how Krishna can reveal his attractiveness in so many different ways to attract different people. So in the Bhagavad-Gita, 10th chapter, 8 to 11 verses are called as the Chaturshloki Gita. In that the first verse, Krishna says that Aham sarvasya prabho mattah sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha Those who know me as the source of everything and become devoted to me. Krishna says they are Buddha. Buddha is related with the word Buddha, which essentially means enlightened. He says, those who know me and are devoted to me, they are enlightened. And yet that same Krishna in the next verse, immediately following it, 10:9, he says, Madchitta madgata prana bodhayanta parasparam kathayantascha nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. He's describing the characteristics of those who are enlightened. Their minds are fixed on me, Madchitta madgata prana, their lives are devoted to me. And then he says they delight in discussing about me. But Krishna doesn't just use the word discussing, he uses bodhayantaha. Now bodhayantaha is, bodha means understanding or explaining or enlightening. So bodhayantaha means they enlighten each other. Now, just in the previous verse, Krishna said they are enlightened. But now he is saying they enlighten each other. So how can the enlightened enlighten each other? Aren't they already enlightened? Well, yes, they are already enlightened in the sense that they have understood that Krishna is the source of everything. Krishna is the ultimate object of devotion. In that sense, they are enlightened. But simultaneously, Krishna as the object of devotion is unlimited. And that's why we can keep learning more and more about the lovability of Krishna, about the greatness of Krishna, his Aishwarya, about the sweetness of Krishna, his Madhurya. And in that sense, the enlightened can keep enlightening each other. And this is Tushyanti cha Ramanti cha. This actually, they find great satisfaction, they find great delight, great joy in it. So how does this happen? This happens because they don't think I'm enlightened and I know everything. They have the humility to hear from others. Krishna is not here talking about a guru speaking to a disciple. Krishna is here talking about enlightened souls talking among each other. Or people who have a similar level of understanding talking among each other. And he's saying they enlighten each other. That's why what I earlier said about humility means accepting a certain, that what I don't know may be more important than what I know. I know Krishna is God and I am experiencing Krishna in this way. Coming back to this diagram, for me that big thing is experienced through this small thing. But this person also feels devotee. But this person is not considered this thing at all important. What is going on over here? Let me understand where this person is coming from. And when we hear from them, we will see that they are also experiencing the big thing, but from some other path. And then we'll start appreciating how broad Krishna is, how many ways he can attract different devotees. So, rather than labeling a particular devotee, because you are Indian, you are being ritualistic. Because you are American, you are Western, you don't respect his rituals at all. It's not like that. Different people can experience Krishna in different ways. And rather than imposing our judgments about who is serious or who is not, based on our experiences alone, if we can be open, okay, where is this devotee coming from? And try to understand or try to see how they are experiencing Krishna. That sometimes they may be wrong, but because we have heard them, not just judge them, they will be more ready to hear us and understand and correct themselves. And sometimes if we hear them, they don't need to correct themselves. Sometimes we may need to correct ourselves. That my understanding was very narrow. Krishna is far bigger than my understanding. And Krishna is attracting this person this way. And of course, most of the times it may be both. That we need to correct some of our understanding and they also need to correct some of their understanding. But all this will happen only when we don't just rush to judgment. When we don't use knowledge in the mode of ignorance. This is so that making one thing into everything, that was the start of the class. So we may make the small thing by which we experience the big thing. The particular way we experience Krishna, we may equate that with Krishna. And therefore we may say somebody who doesn't do this person is not a serious devotee. Or this person is not even a devotee. I was at one place in India where there were two groups of devotees. And one group, they're all householder devotees, but every weekend they would come together and they would have, like in a hall, they would have Mangalarti in the morning. So one group would have the Mangalarti at 4:30. And the other group, they were in different locality, so they were having the Mangalarti at 5 o'clock. And so these two groups came to the 4:30 group and the 5 o'clock group. And there's one devotee who had come from that place, and that devotee was telling me that that they had been a part of both the groups. They had been to visit them. So the 4:30 group was telling, Prabhupada said Mangalarti is 4:30. They are doing Mangalarti at 5 o'clock. There is nothing Mangal in their Arti. They say that Krishna is not going to accept their Mangalarti. If you go to their Mangalarti, you are wasting your time. Now, really? So what is happening over here? Yes, Prabhupada did say do Mangalarti at 4:30. But the point was that Prabhupada wanted us to wake up in the morning and use the morning time of Brahma Muhurta. But in some places, maybe the neighborhood is such that 4 or 4:30 you cannot wake up. Maybe some people don't say close to, but they have to go travel further distance to come in. There could be various reasons. No, it is. We don't want to trivialize any of what Prabhupada has given. But we also have to contextualize. So is Krishna limited? Can't Krishna not reveal himself if somebody is in Mangalarti at 5 o'clock? Yes, if this group feels, yes, we are seriously following Prabhupada because we are coming at 4:30. That's good. They're experiencing Krishna. But does that mean everybody else who is not doing that is not experiencing Krishna at all? No, it doesn't mean that. So it's if we can be serious about the ways in which we experience Krishna. But that doesn't mean we have to be dismissive about anyone who is not experiencing Krishna through the same way, or who is not serious about the things by which we are experiencing Krishna. So when we have this humility that Krishna is bigger than my experience of Krishna, then we will be able to have much more better relationships among devotees. Then our knowledge won't increase conflicts. Our knowledge will decrease conflicts. One of the signs of bhakti, one of the signs of affection that Rupa Goswami says is Guhyam Akhyati Pruchati. That you share your heart in confidence and let the other person share their heart in confidence. So share their heart means what? We share how we are experiencing Krishna. How this little thing is enabling us to experience the big thing. And let the other person also speak. Not absolutize our experience of Krishna and not trivialize or demonize their way of experiencing Krishna. When we do that, then our knowledge won't reinforce our ignorance, but it will remove our ignorance. It will bring us closer to Krishna and it will bring us closer to each other. And that was one of the 7 purposes of ISKCON that Srila Prabhupada said. We want to bring people closer to each other and bring closer to the prime entity Krishna. In this way we can use our knowledge to fulfill the purpose for which Srila Prabhupada established this Krishna consciousness movement. So I'll summarize. I spoke broadly 3 points. First was this knowledge in the mode of ignorance, how it applies to Arjuna. Knowledge in the mode of ignorance means to take one thing and make it to everything. So Arjuna was thinking, how can I fight against my guru and my teacher? But the real big picture was, he was fighting against vicious antisocial elements, and his guru and teacher happened to be on their side. So to reduce one thing to everything was leading him to unjudicious action. Then the broader implication of this is that we may have our biases and prejudices. We may have had negative experiences with certain groups of people, but based on that, we may absolutize it and say all people from this group are bad. And that can make us very narrow-minded, even bigoted. And then specifically the devotee community, we discussed this, that we all want to experience Krishna, and Krishna is the ultimate victory. And we all have our paths. So this 4 framework, I guess, this is not an exhaustive framework, it's an indicative framework. That we all experience Krishna in different ways. And when we experience Krishna through a particular pathway, that small thing leads to a big thing. For us, that small thing will become the big thing itself. And those who do not treat that as a big thing, we may start having problems with them. But instead of judging and condemning them, if we have the humility to acknowledge that what we don't know may be more important than what we know, and then we try to let that person share their heart, and then we share our heart, then the differences may actually help us appreciate Krishna's glory more. And it will improve our understanding and may improve their understanding also. And that way our knowledge won't reinforce our ignorance, rather it will counter, it will remove our ignorance. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any concluding questions or comments? Yes, please.
Question. Can I say that people are experiencing Krishna with their honesty, with their humility, with their sincerity, with dedication, without that person being identified by Krishna? They don't know that. They are not identifying themselves with Krishna's quality, but they are honest. They have humility. They are dedicated in what they are doing. Can I say that they are experiencing Krishna in these qualities, or if they are doing all these things and there is no Krishna, it's just zero? Should I conclude in that way? Because there is one verse in Bhagavad-Gita, humility, pridelessness, cleanliness, bona fide master. Apart from these things, if they are doing anything, then it's nonsense. Is it a union or an intersection with Krishna consciousness?
That's a good question. Thank you. So if somebody is honest, humble, dedicated, are they experiencing Krishna through those activities? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that Krishna says in the 10th chapter, everything attractive, opulent and glorious. Can you open this? So everything opulent, beautiful and glorious, yet vibhuti vatsattam shriya rujitameva. Tatta devava gacchitva mama tejo amshi sambhava. Krishna says, it all manifests a spark of my splendor. So everybody who is attracted to anything, if they're actually experiencing Krishna. When an artist is immersed in making art, they can spend hours just putting one particular line. They're actually experiencing Krishna. So similarly, if somebody is acting with some virtue, and they are actually immersed in that, and they are experiencing Krishna. However, so if from this perspective, you can say everyone's deepest experience is their experience of Krishna.